Welcome to Voices of the Ancestors, where we explore Georgian polyphonic songs
and the women who sing them.
Hello and welcome to our second episode. The voices today are me, Holly Taylor-Zuntz, my trusty co-pilot Susan Thompson, and our very special guest, Jenny Barrett. Now, we wanted to hear from Jenny because she has been singing Georgian songs for 20 years, and she was introduced to this music by a teacher called Gigi Garakanidze, who you'll hear more about in the interview, and she learnt from his son, Georgi, or Gigi for short. So that's why we're honoured to be launching this episode at the Batumi Folk and Church Music International Festival, which is in memory of Georgi, and it's in its 15th anniversary this year. So welcome to our listeners tuning in virtually from the festival, and indeed all our listeners, wherever you find yourself today.
It was so good to hear Jenny's memories of travels in Georgia and time spent with Gigi. I hadn't realised that she learnt the bass to the song Veengara from a recording of him singing. So when Jenny sang Veengara back in 2011 for the visit of the head of the Georgian Orthodox Church, she was feeling a direct link with her teacher, Gigi. And for me, that's what Voices of the Ancestors is all about. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, Jenny, and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being our guest.
Hello, Holly, and hello, Susan. It's great to be here and join you.
Would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm Jenny Barrett. I'm a bit nearer older than younger. I live here in Cambridge on my own. I have a part-time partner who visits occasionally. I've got children and grandchildren, but I'm also still working more or less part-time, I guess, as a psychotherapist. Now in lockdown, it's on Zoom, so I'm having to get quite technically skilled, which I'm not very. So I love singing, I love dancing, and I love swimming in rivers and the sea. Yes, those are my passions.
Excellent. Fantastic. And you've been singing recently despite lockdown, right?
I have indeed. So I'm somebody who actually can't stop singing. I sing all the time, quietly under my breath. And sometimes I'm quite surprised when other people can hear me. And one of my friends once told me that I came with my own musical accompaniment, which I think was a compliment. But yes, so I really, really love singing. And that's been part of my life always, but now focused on the Georgian singing particularly, because it just reaches parts that others can't reach, I think, in some way. And so with lockdown and not being able to go out to the choirs that I'm part of, that felt really difficult because doing it on Zoom just isn't the same. I mean, it's lovely to see familiar faces and that you get just a sort of echo of what it can really be. So as soon as things opened up a little bit, I started to meet with actual people from the various choirs. And so I've met in my garden, just three of us singing in a trio. I've met in somebody else's garden, another trio. I've met in the river. We went and swam in the river and sang in the river hanging onto a tree. And last night we met in the garden and it was raining and we put all our waterproofs on and it was really very dismal and wet. So then we cycled to a nearby underpass, which is filled with graffiti. and but there's nice bright lights, so we could sort of see. And we recorded a few numbers in that nice resonant space with a few shocked people cycling through on their bicycles or jogging through.
That's just brilliant.
So yes, it's feeling more normal, because I am actually being able to sing with real people, and that's just great.
What songs were you singing with them?
Well, with different ones, we have our different repertoires, I suppose. So I was singing with Spike and Lily last night, and we particularly like singing some of the church chants. Dres Sagtoman Madelman we sang. What did we sing? We sang Dzlier Stiroda, actually, that rather sad, mournful one.
So just for our listeners who might not know about different types of Georgian songs, you mentioned chants there. What's the difference between a chant and a folk song? And what are the different types of songs? Would you mind explaining?
Yes, well, as far as I'm aware, then the chants are more formal, but I mean, why I like them is because when you're singing in a trio, each part is quite interesting. In some of the other songs, the bass may have more of a drone quality, but in the chants, often the bass part can be quite interesting and be moving as well. They're quite complex. And so they work really well with three voices because it doesn't, there's just three of you trying to keep together rather than several people on a part. And then the folk songs, which are more jolly and rather various, well, actually, often the ones that sound terribly jolly are all about terribly sad things, about death and loss and longing for the homeland or whatever. And yes, so there's very beautiful folk songs, old ones, but then there's also the more modern city songs, and I do rather like some of those, which are more recently composed and, yes, are lovely in their own way.
Yes, I love the concept of more recently composed, because actually when you're talking with Georgians, they're talking about 100, 150 years ago, aren't they?
Yes, well, maybe.
More recently composed. No, it just always makes me laugh because Georgians talk about it in that way as well.
Yes, and it is lovely that there's such a lot of variety from the different regions of, really different styles of songs, and even with different languages, which if you don't speak Georgian like I don't, you might not even be aware that they're different languages. But, that they are.
Do you find yourself drawn to any particular region?
Well, I don't know. I think I like them all in their different ways. I think you can have a bit too much of Svan songs in the end, but they're rather interesting and challenging because they're rather more different, the tuning being more particular and original. That can be shocking, but I think when you first hear it, then the Gurian ones with their complexity and so on. But I'm also quite drawn to learn more Khorhetian ones and to try to understand how to do the ornamentation that they do in those songs. So yeah, I think it would be boring just to be with one region. It's lovely that there's such variety.
Gazapkhuli ranazia masia
Who taught you these songs? Do you have any really memorable teachers throughout your, is it 20 or so years of singing Georgian songs?
I think it's 20 or so. Yeah, I think it's about 20 years. Before I moved to Cambridge, where I've been living since 2006, I was living in the back of beyond in Suffolk. And I belonged to a world music choir. And then a a workshop was organised by Helen Chadwick, who maybe has come up on this programme. She was bringing Gigi Garakanidze over to England. I think that was when he first was coming over, and he's an ethnomusicologist who I think really was the fount of all the Georgian singing that's happened in England. And he was putting on this workshop in Norwich, and I drove up there quite a long way and did this amazing workshop. And I just thought, wow. And I think I went up and asked him about the song. The first song he taught me was what I call the short Tsmindao, which is quite a simple one. To demonstrate, he just said, oh, well, you sing that part, I'll sing this part. And somebody else was standing there. So we immediately sang in a trio. So I got the flavour of it. Then I went home and taught a part to my daughter and forced her to sing it with me. And then when I came to Cambridge, was looking around for choirs to join, and somebody said, do you realise there's a Georgian choir here? I couldn't believe it. And it's called Chela. And anyway, I phoned them up, and for some reason, they were meeting in Little St. Peter's Church for the session. So I went to the church, went in the door, and there they all were. And I think they said, what song do you know? And I said, well, what about Patonepi or something? And we just immediately launched into it. And it was like, oh, I found my people. And indeed, they are the core of my friendship group in Cambridge, I would say. And then it was some time later, because we meet every Sunday and still are meeting mostly on Zoom at the moment. But many of the members were also part of Maspindzeli down in London. So after a bit, I thought, right, I've got to do this. So I joined Maspindzeli, I think about 2010. And that was when I first went to Georgia to the symposium and sang with the choir there. So that was my first taste, which then led on to an exciting adventure with the Australian Georgian choir, because they were going off to Svaneti. And I thought, well, I really ought to see a bit more of Georgia while I'm here. And those days in Svaneti, it was really basic. And, we were actually eating our meals in a dining room that hadn't had the walls built on it yet. It had a roof, but no walls. And outside stone steps going up to this space, which was fine because at the beginning it was quite sunny. I think it was September, and then suddenly it snowed. And then we were wearing all our winter clothes and sitting there eating our meals, absolutely frozen. And when we had our lessons, it was in the family's main room where old Islam Pilpani was sitting by the stove. The women were coming in to cook on that stove. There was a baby asleep in a bed in the corner, and we were all crammed in,
Oh my God, what an authentic experience.
Yes, and it's changed, and it's fun because it has changed a bit since then. They've been able to extend and develop, as have many other Georgian teachers, because suddenly discovering how popular Georgian singing is with people from the West. And so it's really very grand now when I go there, but it's fun to look back and compare it to how it was and that first experience, which I'm glad that I had.
And I salute you for being an intrepid solo traveller, Jenny. Because you've got similar, I'm not saying similar tales, but I mean, you also travelled to Tusheti, and that's no mean destination.
Oh, wow. Yes, that was probably the most exciting trip that I did, with a small group of friends from Chela, and I think one from Maspindzeli, and Nana Mzetamze agreed to go with us, and her son Dato, and he was about 15 then, I think. And even getting there is quite a thing, because we were in I guess it was a 4-wheel drive car, but you have to go up this long winding road up to the pass, and it's unmetalled. It was then, and there was nothing to stop you falling over the edge, and you could see a few cars that had fallen over the edge, and it was fine until you met somebody coming the other way, especially if you were on the side that was on the edge, and there were shrines all the way up,
Oh my God.
where you could pray for safely getting up the next bit.
Oh God.
And then when we got, it was just a blessing that we had somebody with us who could speak Georgian, and she would phone ahead to the various places we would stay and arrange. So when they knew that we were coming, they would usually light the wood fire under the boiler, so there might be some hot water for a shower if you were lucky. And mostly eating, I think, in candlelight and things, although they've got a little bit of electricity from solar panels and so on. And then we did a lot of walking between the different spots. And I do remember on one occasion that our luggage was carried by the local police car, who we just were talking to the police, and they said, "Oh, we'll take your luggage to the next place," so that we could walk to it. But then the really most wonderful thing was we were singing that Nana wanted to get the authentic words for the shepherd's song. That was a song that we knew and had sung. And so the driver that we'd got took us to where these shepherds were in the far, far hills with their, flocks and their cattle. And we had to drive through 3 rivers. And then he said, "Look, I'm sorry, I can't drive any further." So we got out and we walked up this path, and the river was beside us. And I remember seeing bear prints in the mud beside the river. There were bear prints. And then as we drew near to the shepherd's encampment, which was all sort of ramshackle polythene bags over, spread over whatever, very just rough and ready, the huge dogs, of course, came rushing out, woof, woof, woof. And luckily the shepherds were close behind. And Nana was able to speak to them and explain who we were and about our mission. And so, of course, wherever you can sing, because I'm sure we quickly broke into song, they welcome you in. I seem to remember I had to borrow a tracksuit bottom from one of the shepherds because it was rather cold to put over my shorts. And then we were fed with cha-cha and bread and milk and cheese made from the milk because they'd got the cows, and there was a churn of milk, and this little foal was drinking out of the milk churn, and we thought, "Oh, well, what's that?" And they said, "Oh, well, the thing is that the mother of the foal was killed by a bear. So the foal is an orphan, but don't worry, we've killed the bear." And then the pièce de résistance of this meal was that they went and brought out dried bear meat from the chimney that they'd been smoking. And so we had that with our cha-cha and our bread and our cheese.
What? This is the most crazy story I've ever heard, Jenny. Just gets better and better.
Was this before or after you'd learnt the song that has the bear in it? Because that's Makinos, isn't it? I can't say it properly.
That Malkini, but the dance.
Yeah, that one.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know that song at that point. But yes, I think Nana had earnest discussion about the words for the shepherd's song, which is the one that I sang with you, Susan, when we went to that fundraising thing.
That's right, which was in aid of Tusheti, wasn't it?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And it sort of kind of puts context, because I've seen those Georgian shepherd dogs, and if you've never seen one, I mean, their paw prints are like the size of a dinner plate, aren't they? I mean, they are massive,
really big.
dogs. And you can see why they need to be.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Jenny, earlier you mentioned about Georgian songs being something a bit more like nothing else, like no other type of songs. And I wanted to ask you, why is that?
I always think that Georgian singing for me is like Argentinian tango dancing, which stands out amongst the other dancing I do as being different and special, because in both of them, there's something about having to be very tuned in to the other people in the dancing, one other person, in the Georgian singing, 2 people, and that you can't do it on your own, that if you try and sing your part in a Georgian song on your own, it doesn't really make sense. It only makes sense when you put it together with the other voices, and that's what's so lovely about it, I think, and particularly that you can have that experience of singing and really not knowing which part you're singing, you just become part of the whole in some way. And I find that quite transcendent. And because you get to know the other parts, really, because you've heard them. But yes, and that if one is missing, it's really quite difficult to sing your part with one missing, because suddenly it doesn't make sense. So I love that about it. That it just sort of lifts off in some way that doesn't happen with other songs. And yes, I suppose the fact that it's a very ancient tradition is lovely to know that it goes back a long way. And I guess that's true of all folk processes, isn't it? And we certainly come across, every village has its own version of a song. So you've just learnt it and think, yeah, I know how to do this one. And then you sing it to another teacher and they say, oh, no, it's not like that. It's like this or whatever. So, it is definitely an alive folk process.
Tsmindao, Ghmerto, Tsmindao, Dzlier, Tsmindao, Udao, Sheri, Tzchane,
What does Voices of the Ancestors mean to you?
Well, I like things that continue and that go back and that one can sense going forward. So, for instance, my family is a singing family. My father had a whole repertoire of songs that he sang whenever we were on car journeys, and they were just things he'd picked up in the army, from musicals. I really don't, and from his own Scottish family, I think. So some of them are Scottish songs, and but they were just, sung, and we all just picked them up and sang along. And so I tried to teach those to my children. They certainly had them sung at them in the car and so on. And I like that set, just like it's lovely to pass on pieces of furniture or things like that. Or indeed in the garden, I think that's another way I'd compare it. Like it's lovely to look in your garden and think, oh yes, that plant was given to me by so-and-so, or this is a cutting that I got from this person. So I feel like that with songs, that you also think where you learned them, where they've come from. I like that about them, and that sense of them going back a long way. Yes.
And you said before that you sang to your grandsons. You have two, I believe. And
Yes,
I just wondered,
yes.
what did you choose to sing to them?
Well. So, yes, my daughter had identical twin sons. So it was, and they were very premature, and that was quite difficult at the beginning. I was there a lot, and it just comes instinctively to me to sing to babies and to children. So I would sometimes be holding both of them, one each side of my face on my shoulders, a great armful of babies. And I was just had this sense of trying to sort of put a vibration into them. And I actually sang the Ia Patonepi, the very sort of, not the one that I do with you, Susan. That's really like quite a powerful spell. So obviously I was actually singing the bass probably, because that's the part that I sing. So it was just a sort of vibration.
And sadly, like you said earlier, our podcast listeners can't see the context in which you're speaking to us, but I can see the corner of a rather grand painting. Can you tell us that that's part of your ancestry?
Yes. So what you can see is a large portrait painted by, I think, a great granduncle or something like that. And it's of my grandmother, my father's mother, who goes by the name Lorna Margaret de Courcy Hamilton Hume.
That's a brilliant name.
Which is quite a mouthful, but I think it is rather a wonderful name. And I did at one point after my divorce wonder whether I should drop Barrett and become de Courcy Hamilton, but I thought, oh no, it's too much trouble. But I quite fancy being Jenny de Courcy Hamilton.
Oh, I'm quite taken with that. I think you might have a new name from me from now on.
Yes.
And did you say that you've had various Georgian guests in your house over the years, but that had caught somebody else's eye?
Yes. Well, I did have to stay Gigi Garakanidze, who's Edisha's son, who led Mtiebi after his death, and he came on several occasions to Cambridge to give workshops to Chela. And on one happy occasion, I got to host him and a couple other of the boys, because I've got a few spare rooms. And somehow, over a glass of wine or whatever, yes, he saw the portrait, but also I got out the family tree that my father was terribly proud of. And at the top of the family tree, it says, Rollo, 1st Duke of Normandy, near kinsman of William the Conqueror. So Gigi was very impressed by that and insisted on calling me Princess.
Was there maybe an idea about how to learn or how to sing the songs that you got from either Edisha or Gigi?
Well, I mean, with all the early learning and teaching of Georgian songs, it was always done by ear, by just listening to it. And, we never had music. We sometimes, if we were lucky, got some words. And And that's a sad thing that's changing a bit with more people joining. For instance, our choir, there's quite musical people, but who are very addicted to looking at musical notation and insisting that there's got to be scores, and then somebody clever will produce a score. But then you get this thing where somebody will say, oh no, but that's not right, you're not singing it like the score. And we all know that the score is just somebody's take on how it was sung on one occasion. It's not right or wrong, and that also it's then written with a Western tuning, whereas a lot of the songs are sung with a Georgian tuning, which is very different, where the scale is different, and actually you are having to bend the notes a bit. So yes, I mean, even though it can be more difficult to learn just by ear and listening, it suits me really. I like to learn that way, and certainly that's how I remember. He would have taught us that way.
Yes.
And sometimes, afterwards to have the music, it sometimes helps just to sort of prompt your memory if a long time's gone by. But on the whole, I prefer to actually have a recording of the teachers singing it and to hear their voice. In fact, Veengara that we sang that time, Susan, in John Smith Square, the recording that I was using to do my part, because I sang the bass, was Gigi singing that, in fact.
Yes, you're right.
How is it to listen back to a recording of somebody that's died?
Well, it's sad, isn't it? But I think it is wonderful when somebody's voice is captured on a recording. And I know, it makes you think maybe it's important to record things like that are pleasant to listen to, where it doesn't make people too sad to listen to them, but that there you are at your best or something like that, singing. So it is sad. I mean, goodness me, he went before his time. It seems completely unfair.
Yes.
But Georgian men seem to grow up so fast, and they do so much even when they're so young, is what I feel. A lot is achieved in a short life. I'm always surprised when you hear their ages that they're younger than they seem, because they have a sort of presence and a confidence that probably an Englishman of the same age wouldn't have. And maybe, I think that particularly struck me when I first came across the whole supra thing and the standing up and being able to speak so eloquently from the heart. I'd not heard English men do that. And yet quite young Georgian men will be able to stand and be very poised and express themselves.
And have you ever experienced a supra where it's a woman's supra effectively?
Most of my experiences of supras in Georgia are very often the women are a bit banished, are out there doing the cooking. But I guess it's a bit different when one is with the Chamgelianis in Svaneti, because that's a singing family of women, 3 sisters, so there it was more like a women's supra, I think.
Yes, when we were talking about Tusheti earlier, I was reminded, because we had learnt some Tushetian songs together in order to sing at a performance that was raising some money for somebody that had travelled in Tusheti. And that was the first time I'd heard of a ritual where at certain times of the year there's a man's supra with all the village men, but at the same time there's a women's supra with all the village women. I don't know if you remember that, but...
No, I don't. I came across that in Thailand, actually, but they have a women's New Year and a men's New Year, but with ritual dances. But no, I'm not sure that I came across it.
Yeah.
Wow, it's interesting to know that these traditions are happening in different cultures all over the world.
Yes, yes.
When I first started singing Georgian or learning Georgian songs, it was very much in England, being taught by the occasional Georgian who came over. And the groups were often mostly women learning, but women who would sing with what I would describe as a sort of, I don't know, a soft English voice,
Yes.
soft English women's voice. And we're being confronted usually, I think in the early days, by men teaching who would go, yeah, that, you've got the tune now. Come on, now use your whole voice. And the whole room really not understanding.
Yes.
And in fact, probably one of the early, the few women we've learnt from, I mean, Magda Keverishvili, I remember being at a Giving Voice, I think. And I think, Jenny, you were at that. Who's a small dot of a woman, but still has that oomph in the voice somehow.
Yes. Yes, and it's true that the songs, when sung in that very English way, are completely different songs. In fact, when you hear them then sung by Georgians or in that kind of a style, suddenly they take on a completely different timbre or something. It's just different, isn't it? And I think that as well as the Georgian teachers coming over and showing us how to do that, that Frank Kane has been quite important. I don't know if you've talked about him on the programme, but, as far as helping people get in touch with the different aspects of their voice. And certainly that happened for me with Frank Kane, that he did a workshop in Cambridge. And I had always sung as a soprano, assumed I'm a soprano. You can hear I've got quite a deep voice. And I think Tamta, who taught us in Maspindzeli then, had suggested to me that I could sing the bass on the Veengara that I then did with you and Miranda, Susan. And I was like, I can't sing bass, I'm a soprano. But and it was partly that workshop with Frank Kane helping me to find this other part in my voice, and also with the breath control, and then discovering this note and sort of singing it and finding that it went on and on and on and on. When I sing in my bass voice, I've got endless breath. I don't know what it is.
Wow.
It just goes on and on and on.
Amazing. And Jenny, I know you more recently, and I can't imagine you without your bass voice. It's so powerful and so rich.
Yes, and within my family, you are a tradition. You are up there, revered, a tradition. And the story of you in the middle of a concert being set off on a song on not quite the note that you were expecting, and you were holding the bass part. And as a group of anybody that I've shown this video to who was actually present, we were just so rooting for you because the notes just went down and down and down. We could all feel this the lowest note coming. You nailed it.
We'll have to add that one into the recording.
Yes, that was a surprise even to me. To think, am I going to get there? I don't know. But yeah, so it's fun to have those different parts inside you, to find you've got this sort of male bit, and then I can still do the soprano bit. So,
that's great.
There's nothing lost, is there? It's just more, everything adds and joins up together. Oh, that's tremendous.
Jenny, it's been so wonderful speaking to you today. And I feel like we've really covered so much ground.
Yeah.
We have, haven't we? Yes.
From the tops of mountains to the river.
To the very low notes of Jenny's voice.
Absolutely.
True. Well, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Voices of the Ancestors with Holly Taylor-Zuntz and Susan Thompson. Our guest was Jenny Barrett, with music by Ialoni, Mtiebi, Kimilia, Maspindzeli, the Chamgeliani sisters and Levan Bitarovi, Sakhioba and Mzetamze. For more information about this and other episodes, visit voicesoftheancestors.co.uk.